Entering the atmosphere in T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Omega Metroid podcast. It is episode 225. I feel like that is just an absolutely crazy thing to say. What is up, everyone? Hope you're doing absolutely fantastic out there. Thanks for tuning in. I am Dak alongside Doom today because Andy is out sick. So it's just the two of us today, and after about 4 weeks of Metroid Prime 4, right? We talked about the Metroid Prime. We had our first impressions of Metroid Prime 4. We talked about the story. We did 2 weeks of Q&As. Now it's time to let's put Metroid Prime 4 to the side a little bit, let it marinate. Let's see what we get soon, and we are now going to jump over to another awesome Metroid game that I'm excited to talk about. Doom, we're talking about Zero Mission today. We're talking about Metroid Zero Mission for the Game Boy Advance and now other platforms as well. We are doing a definitive ranking episode. Doom, how are you doing and how are you feeling about the Zero Mission episode we're about to do?
Pretty good, and don't worry, folks. We are ready to milk that Metroid Prime 4 content all over again. We're just taking a quick detour for today, but we will be right back on the Prime 4 grind very, very soon. But yeah, you and me were just talking about it before the show, but like we both really love Zero Mission a lot, so I'm very excited to talk about this. And then kind of just outside the realm of Metroid, I told you guys last time, which was actually 2 weeks ago for me because I wasn't on the last episode.
Yeah.
But last time I was talking about how I was going to start Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, and oh my god, I freaking love this game so far, man. It's low-key one of my Game of the Year candidates so far. I am really enjoying it. I'm so excited to play more of it. And yeah, I'm having so much fun.
I was going to ask you, since you haven't been on the show in a little bit, how you been, and you got to that. How far are you into Thousand Year Door?
I haven't had a lot of time to play it, so I'm still like in the beginning. I think I'm in like I want to say I'm like at the end of the first chapter, maybe the start of the second chapter. I can't quite remember. I'm pretty fresh, yeah. Yeah, I'm still pretty fresh right now, so yeah.
So you
but yeah,
gotten to the best. The game hasn't even gotten going for you, man. Like you're still got a lot to go.
I know, and I'm already just absolutely loving it. The writing is top notch. The combat, like it's turn-based combat, but it's also like so engrossing and engaging. I didn't realize how much interactivity there is with the audience too, and I love that kind of fourth wall breaking you do there, and just how much that plays into the gameplay. But if you get too much into it, you might accidentally knock out people on the audience that are on your side, and like I love stuff like that. And so and I can tell that this is just the start, and they're going to keep building more and more on those mechanics, and I just cannot see how insane I cannot wait to see how insane this game gets.
Well, I'm happy that you're enjoying it. You really need to play more because you need to get a lot farther into the game. It's funny you bring that up, though, because both the game we're talking about today and Thousand Year Door came out in the same year in 2004. So, which I had to double check just to make sure. I knew that was true for Zero Mission, but I couldn't remember if Thousand Year Door was 2003 or 2004 or not. What a great year for the GameCube in 2000, and for Nintendo, for the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance, 2004. Yeah, awesome game. On my end, nothing crazy on my end gaming-wise, but I did finally beat the latest Destiny 2 raid, which was really great, really awesome. And I got to do it with a friend of mine that I hadn't gamed with or hung out with or talked to in like a decade and a half. So it was really cool. I don't remember if I mentioned that on the show last week, but if I did, then you get to hear it again. If I didn't, it was awesome. Today, though, let us talk about Metroid Zero Mission. We are doing a definitive ranking episode. So we haven't done one of these in quite a while, I think, actually, since like October or November of last year, or maybe it was earlier this year, but I think it's been a while.
Yeah. It's I want to say the last time we did this was with Metroid Prime 3 last year. I want to say we did that in like September or October. And that was another one. I've said this a lot, but Prime 3, I've always like held up Prime 3 in high regards, but like before that definitive ranking, I would have considered that game like, maybe a middle or low 8 out of 10. Still a really good game. Still a great end to that trilogy, but upon revisiting that game for that definitive ranking episode, I grew such a greater appreciation for that title. And while I still technically consider it the weakest of the trilogy, I think it's easily a 9 out of 10. And I definitely think that Prime 3 is just such a quality title and a phenomenal ending to the trilogy.
Yeah. So at least for now, who knows?
Yes.
No, I loved that, and it got me out to play that game on my original, or not my original, but on the Wii again, which was fun. And speaking of which, I played a little bit of Zero Mission before this on my Game Boy, or I was on my DS, but I didn't play it on the Switch, even though I know it's on Nintendo Switch Online now, which is part of the reason why we're also doing this episode, is because, the game is available again on the most recent Nintendo console. If you haven't gotten it, go get it, go play it, enjoy it. I would even maybe go, if you're listening to this episode and haven't played it yet, go and play it and then come back and maybe hear our thoughts on it. But I actually broke out because I have my DS and Game Boy Advance stuff like right under my desk here. So I just was like, I'm just going to play it on the old fashioned, the DS Lite, which was really fun. So I'm excited to talk about this game. This is one of my top 5 favorite Metroid games for sure. I mean, my favorite games are the 3 original Prime Trilogy games, Fusion and Zero Mission. Easy, no question. One of my most played games of all time. Love this game. So that's why I'm happy to jump into it. I wish Andy was here to talk about it because, well, I don't know, because after seeing the scores he gave in that chat, I don't know if I want to repeat what he...
That later at the end, but I definitely have some thoughts about that.
But I wish he was here because this is, I think, a game that consensus-wise is pretty well-loved by everybody that's played it, by just the Metroid fan base and community in general. I think one of the best remakes of a game ever, period, just straight up. And while I don't think, there's still merit and it's fun to play the original Nestroid, I think this is, the definitive original Metroid experience in terms of like the first game of the series, so to speak. Though it is really fun to go back and play the original too. So yeah, excited to do this. Any other thoughts, Doom, before we jump into this one?
So while Metroid Prime was like the first Metroid game I really sunk my teeth into and played, Zero Mission is the first game that I ever beat in this series. And so, this one holds a special place in my heart, and like it's still so much fun to go and replay today. I'm not really much of a speedrunner, but Zero Mission and Dread to a slightly lesser extent as well are like the 2 games in the series that I just absolutely love, perfecting my run perfecting my techniques. And that's why I had so much fun working on the speedrunning portion of the guide when we did that for OmegaMetroid.com. Is just because I really, for the first time, I came back to the game for the first time in years, and I was still learning, all these new techniques and pushing myself, to get that video footage there. And yeah, it's such an absolute blast to play. Never gets old, no matter how long it's been.
No, I 100% agree. And I think it's about time we jump right into our definitive rankings. So let's do this. Let me recap, I guess, how we do this, because actually it's been a little bit for me, so I think a refresher for all of us is good. So we have a few categories, which if I read them off quickly is like we have 5 or we have 10 categories or something. We have a bunch of categories. So stuff like the world of the game, the art style, the story, the gameplay, the expansions, the music, etc. We are going to give a score for each of one of those from 1 to 5, 1 being just not great, 5 obviously being, wow, awesome, I love this. I don't remember what we do after that. Do we tally them up, or do we just give a overall kind of score IGN style? I forget what we do for this. I should know.
I want to say we average it all out.
We average it. Okay, you know what? So here's what we'll do. We'll average it out. We're not going to combine our lists, or do you want to do that? Are we going to do just one? We're going to agree, or
I don't think we've ever combined our lists. I think we've always kept our lists separate.
Say we combined it for something, but maybe it was for a ranking for something else. Maybe it was a non-definitive ranking, and that's where I'm getting mixed up. But you're right. All right, so we'll have our separate things. We'll average it together. I don't know about you, but I can already tell what the average of my score or my list is, so it won't be a super surprise when we get there. But without further ado, because I've already been yapping for quite some time, let's jump into it. The first category is the world category. I don't know why I put it that way, but it's talking about the world of the game, right? the atmosphere, the vibe, the world that you play in, and all the pieces that come together in that aspect, which obviously in the Metroid series is not only very important, but very distinctive. Doom, for Metroid Zero Mission, what did you put here?
I'm gonna give the world a 4. I really like the world of Zero Mission. It's definitely. I will say the only reason I'm not going to give it a 5 is because I do wish that a little bit of it more. I wish it had, and I guess this technically kind of bleeds into the next category as well, but it doesn't have quite that oppressive of an atmosphere as the original NES Metroid does, and I wish we got a little bit more of that in Zero Mission. But that being said, what we did get, I think, is still absolutely fantastic. The art direction, I love the this kind of comic book manga hybrid art style that we have through Zero Mission. You even get that in like the key art and like the renders and all that, and I think it's so gorgeous. The parallax backgrounds in some cases just look so cool when you're like running by and you see like different background pieces like moving to to create that illusion of movement. It's so cool. And I love how diverse each of the environments are. Like, you have, even within the areas themselves, like you have Norfair, for example. It's not just the magma area. You also have, this turquoise kind of bubbly rock area as well. That's very distinct on the map. And, each area, has all that stuff. And they don't always necessarily transition to each other seamlessly, but like, I also don't really mind it, especially for a title of that age. But yeah, I'm gonna give the world a 4. Really love what they did with it in Zero Mission.
Yeah, I gave it a 5 on my end, easy 5. And I think in a large part, I'm kind of looking at this of like, what did Zero Mission do well compared to like Nestroid or like really build upon it? And this is something I think that Zero Mission absolutely knocked out of the park, because you get so much more detail and hints and flair from like Chozo influences and the Space Pirates. You get more Chozo statues and parts of the background that obviously show their ruins and their architecture. And then same thing for the Space Pirates. You get so much more intel and like depictions of like how they build things and what their ships look like and how they, enter the scene, right? Like there's so much more going on with like the different elements that were found in the original game. I love like that one area. I want to say it's either in Ridley or Brinstar where there's like a broken Chozo statue you got to like jump over and run by. Like that's a nice little detail. I loved seeing like the cool new like Space Pirate like designs that we seemed like we saw in Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, by the way. I love the atmosphere. Yeah, maybe it doesn't have that same oppressiveness that I guess you're hinting at, but to me, I love that this game still makes you absolutely feel isolated. Like you're on an alien planet, you have no allies, everything's trying to kill you, and you feel like you're going deeper and deeper into an alien world, probably more so than I think in the original game. So I gave it a 5, easy 5 for me. And I'll even go into the next category here because you hinted on it a little bit. I also gave the art style a 5 for the reasons that you mentioned and then some. I mean, I love the comic book, heavily outlined style that bleeds into the gameplay but is very present in the cutscenes. I love like the red tinge on the outline of all like the pixel of like the environment and like the blocks of the walls and the floor. Obviously the backgrounds, like the parallax, like you mentioned, some of the backgrounds in this game are some of the best in the series. Absolutely beautiful. I love like the high contrast colors that you get in all different areas. I love the areas with the big green or red bubbles. Yeah, like I easy art style 5 as well for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 5 here as well. I love the art style of Zero Mission. It's not even necessarily my preferred art style. Like my preferred art direction is, kind of the kind of semi-realism look that, the Prime trilogy goes, especially Primes 1 and 2 in particular. That's probably my preferred look, but I feel like Zero Mission, as a standalone game, like it makes itself unique and it commits to it so hard and it does it so well that I just really like what it does there. And yeah, pretty much. I like there's something else I was going to say about it, and I don't know. Oh, I know. So what I think is really interesting is how so a lot of the Game Boy Advance games, a lot of these early GBA games, they were made with like really brightened pixels to compensate for the lack of the backlight for the original Game Boy Advance. And you can especially tell with some of those games like Fusion, for example, if you play it without like a screen filter, it's a bit overly saturated. It pops a little bit too much. Some people like it. Some people prefer the original look, and I definitely tend to prefer, at least with Fusion, the filtered look, the way it's intended to look on a non-backlit GBA. Zero Mission is the complete opposite. I think I actually kind of like the more saturated look that you get. That isn't technically the intended look when you have that backlight present, but yeah, I think for what they're going for, it just makes a lot more sense to have saturated colors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned though, I like the comparison to like the Prime style, which obviously is done differently because it's a 3D game, but it would be really cool if they tried like a stylized 3D Metroid, like a Metroid Prime game that was stylized like Zero Mission and maybe had a bit more of a cartoony look to it almost. I feel like the backlash would be like Wind Waker back in the day, but I feel like it would be so cool to maybe do that, maybe down the line.
I feel like it'd have to be a spin-off title, and it would have to be paired with the announcement of a mainline title. You couldn't, because otherwise you might get like a Federation Force thing.
I don't know. I think the Federation Force, and this is a separate thing, but that was released at a time when there wasn't anything good going on. If there's some good Metroid going on.
Well, that's what I mean. You announce it with a mainline. You have a mainline entry to look for on the horizon, is what I mean. You don't just announce it like on its own.
Well, I think it could be announced on its own. Like if you had Metroid Prime 4 and 5 and 6 come out, I don't think you would need to know Metroid Prime 7's coming out also if this was announced. I think you could, if you had a good stretch of Metroid games, you could do it. But anyway, I mean, I don't know. Zelda took the risk with making Wind Waker a mainline game, and I don't know. I think that's reflected positively upon it eventually. So even if it was received maybe not as well at the beginning. Anyway, that would be cool though. Okay, let's jump into the next category here. This is the story of the game, which obviously is not exactly the same as the original because it adds a little bit more, both in terms of the ending of the game as well as it adds some cutscenes that show up here and there and all that. I mean, Doom, I'll throw it to you actually first, as I went 2 in a row.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'll give it a 3. But also I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Like the story is a 3, but it doesn't need to be anything more or less. It's not like Metroid Dread where I went into that game, wanting like a really compelling story, wanting compelling lore, to build off of, the cliffhanger of Fusion and what was established there. With what NES Metroids do, it's based off of a fairly simple story already. You pepper in a few more details already, and I think, it's a 3, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it does what it needs to do, and I think what it does add is, pretty interesting, just in the form of like those small cinematics. And even if those cinematics usually don't add much, sometimes you do get those additional story details, like the little writing that Samus did on the Chozo wall that you get when you beat the credits. It's a little thing, a little bit of sprinkle, a little sprinkle there that just adds a little bit extra there.
I mean, I love those cutscenes. Those are some of the most memorable cutscenes in any game I've ever played, especially a Nintendo game. And I know there's some people out there just want pure gameplay, blah blah blah, and I like that Dread added cutscenes and obviously Samus turns and all that. But I mean, I love the cutscenes in Zero Mission. I think each and every one adds like either some kind of great plot development or character development or some kind of visual that resonates very strongly, both just as a player of the game, but also as a Metroid fan. I mean, I remember like playing the game back then, and by then I, was learning more and more about Metroid as I played Prime and Fusion and Prime 2 and the Smash games and, learning more about the other games that I would eventually go on to play in the series. So to see stuff like those flashbacks in Zero Mission, where you do get to see Samus interacting with the Chozo as a kid, and you do get to see, some more details about what actually happened during the Nestroid game, I thought was just so cool, so awesome. Even like just like ones that weren't plot heavy cutscenes, like there's the one where you're going into Tutorian and you have the Metroids like feeding on that dead space pirate as the music, like the foreboding music plays. Awesome cutscene. Or even, which is more plot heavy, but another great one where Samus, I mean, this is an iconic cutscene where Samus leaves, gets shot down by the space pirates, and has a Breath of the Wild moment over on the cliff overlooking the ship as Zero. You get the introduction of Zero Suit Samus, which changed Metroid as a franchise forever. and its representation both in the series and outside in other media, for better or for worse. All of that, I think. I mean, this was an easy 5 for me. It has the classic Metroid story, but is enhanced by all those cutscenes. The ending section that gets added on is so cool, and such a great expansion of the story, and the Zero Suit part I thought is really cool. It's a nice like stealth section that has it's not just like a new gameplay section for new gameplay's sake, right? It had a story point, showed Samus is even just as resilient, if not more so, without the power suit. And you have like the Chozo test element brought into it, Ridley showing up and for whatever reason making a robot that looks exactly like him. All of that stuff. I mean, I think just fires on all cylinders. 5 for me, easy.
It's not so much about the story for me with Zero Mission. It's more about like the raw sequence of events and details that are added. And on that sense, I would agree with you. Like definitely a 5 there. And I guess that's why when I say like the story's a 3 for me, but also like that's not important for me. Like when it comes to Zero Mission, it's whatever.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. I guess that's just the way I view it. But yeah, I totally agree with you there. And I also one of the cool additions that I love is that they actually give context to like the shoulder pads versus the basketball shoulders, the basketball pauldrons. Before then, you had the power suit that had that, and then everything after was the various suit and palette swaps. But in this game, they actually retcon it so that there's actually a reason that Samus has just the regular shoulder pads versus the pauldrons, and I thought that was really cool. And then they kind of went back on that again after after Samus Returns, which whatever.
Yeah, but in Zero Mission itself, it was really cool, and I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've always been someone, and I've said this before, where the story and the world of Metroid is just as enticing to me as the gameplay and the music, and it's a full package game, a full package series that has all of those things working in tandem that make it so cool. And I love going back into Zero Mission, getting lost in the world, and then watching those cutscenes again and having those interactions is all really cool. It's not a complex story, but I mean, I don't think complexity necessarily means it's better. I think the simple story that Zero Mission has and then adds on to is just really executed, I think, flawlessly for what it is, and doesn't get in the way of the game too, which is also great. It adds to it and enhances it, and it's really awesome and memorable. So yeah, easy 5, but I see where you're coming from. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I go back to the game. The cutscenes are just so good, and and you get that see that art style every time too, which is great.
I love the Mother Brain cutscene when you first enter North Fair, and she just like rolls her eye out from the back. So freaking creepy. I love that.
Yeah. I always love the one where Ridley shows up and he's just chilling in the ship and coming through. I'm like, yep, big purple ship for big purple Ridley. I mean, I guess he's like brown or tan in that game, but whatever. All right, next one, which is kind of related to story, but also gameplay, just the general progression of the game. Pacing. For Zero Mission, the pacing. I gave this a 4.5. I think Zero Mission is probably one of the best paced Metroid games in the series. I think it's... the only reason it's not a 5 for me is that the power bomb comes so late in the game. Is really the biggest one for me, and I'm sure is a sentiment other people share. I don't mind that the power bomb is the last item in the game. I actually like that we get not only that, but also the screw attack earlier as a result. But you just get the power bomb so late in the game that it feels like inconsequential. You're already so strong by that point, and I'm like, I wish I had more time with the power bomb in the game. But besides that, I feel like the game just is a constant flow of fun action. It ramps up really well to the end of the game and then continues ramping up with the second section. Like, it really builds to the third act really well. My only real drawback from it is the power bomb. The late game's really great, but the power bomb's kind of the placement's kind of the only thing that does it for me. Otherwise, it would be a 5, but I'd give it a 4.5.
100% in agreement there. I'm not going to go for a 0.5 though. I'm just going to call it a 4 out of 5.
I'll give it a 4.
Yeah.
I'll give it a 4.
Yeah, I'm a fully commit to that. But yeah, up until the very end of the game, I'd say it's perfectly paced. And even then, I think it's a fairly minor nitpick at the end of the day. I still absolutely love, fully 100%ing Dread, but yeah, that 100, not just the power bomb, but the 100% sweep in general, you do have to go a little bit out of the way. It's not something that you can just naturally do throughout your adventure. I personally don't mind it. Some people will mind it. But yeah, it's that power bomb itself really that is going to bring it down to a 4 for me, especially because technically you don't even need the power bombs. There's a secret passage just above that you can actually access and bypass the actual power bomb block that you need to do to access Robo Ridley. So it's technically not even a required item if you know where to look, and most people take that route for like the low percent runs. But yeah, other than that, everything. Let's done with the negatives. Let's talk about the positives. There is always something happening in Zero Mission. There's no there's no boredom. There's no downtime. You are always on your way to do something exciting and fun. Like the game is pretty much always firing on a 10 when it comes to that raw gameplay and taking you from place to place. The backtracking, there's lots of backtracking, but the distance you have to travel isn't too much. I really can't ask for much more than that in a Metroid game.
No, that's a great point. One of the things I love about Zero Mission is how you just come across things and you're like, oh, I got to deal with that. Like the larva boss, where you're just like, oh, what is that thing? It's not even necessarily like a story beat, and just like that you would anticipate. It's like, oh, Samus came across this nasty thing, and has to deal with it, which is great, which I think is totally cool, which is totally awesome.
It kind of plays into that larva in particular kind of plays into its own sub story where it's you the third one you encounter is ensnared by all these vines, and it's like is it trying to absorb it? Is it is it trying to decompose it? And then you fight that boss. And then you go to Ridley's lair, and then you find the creature hatched from it has burrowed, and then you go back up and you see that it's created the hole, and you go down the hole, and now you're fighting Imago, and just Zero Mission is so creative with stuff like that.
That is, I'll even add that to story, because that's a great just little story arc there against the bug, right? But yeah, I love that. That was a really cool part of the game as well. I really don't have too much to say for gameplay, because I gave it a 5. I think it speaks for itself. I think the gameplay feel for Zero Mission for a 2D Metroid before modern Dread type Samus Returns type 2D Metroid is just peak. 2D Zero Mission feels perfect. Obviously adds stuff like saving and the map, which is a huge improvement from the original game. So yeah, I mean, you have your classic Metroid experience. It's super fun. I have nothing else really to say about it.
Yeah, Zero Mission's an easy 5 for me. Again, the only, and this is a minor nitpick in the age of modern Metroid, but every Metroid game pre-Dread is hard to go back in some way without that slide ability. It's so convenient. But I mean, again, it's a small nitpick at best. And my God, the gameplay in Zero Mission, even compared to Dread, is still amongst probably my favorite in the 2D series. Maybe not in terms of boss fights and raw combat. I think Dread comes out on top there, but just the general movement and just the general traversal and you said that game feel, the weightiness of your jumps. It almost kind of feels like playing Fox in Final Destination, where you have a lot of air control, but you don't get a lot of air time. And I really love the way that Zero Mission kind of balances that out. And especially, my God, this speed booster. I wish Andy was here, because we would be geeking out about the speed booster, but while Dread, in my opinion, technically has the best speed booster, and there's so much different tech and ways that you can preserve your momentum to do all sorts of crazy tricks, Zero Mission, I feel like it has that perfect balance of limited functionality, but just enough to where you can pull off crazy stuff, and it requires such an insane level of perfection for some of those skips that when you do pull it off, it feels satisfying as hell, especially a lot of the unintended Shine Spark skips and shortcuts and whatnot. It's some of these puzzles and shortcuts might be my favorite in the entire series. The Shine Spark, I feel like, could be in a category of its own, but even apart from that, I still give the gameplay a 5.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that as well later. But yeah, totally agree. I don't know. I don't have a hard time going back to the older 2D Metroids without the slide, though I feel you. I love the slide, but when I go back and play those games, I don't get the feeling of oh, this would be so much better with a slide. It wasn't made for it, It's Dread was the environment in like Dread, for example, is made for having a slide. Whereas I feel like in this game, like I guess you could argue in some cases it might be, but I never like I was playing Zero Mission, I wasn't like, oh, I wish I had a slide right now. But I guess maybe if the idea came to me, then I'd be like, oh, that'd be great. But I don't know. It feels fine without it. I think how it was constructed is fine without it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's a nitpick. You know, it's like, oh no, I have to take an extra half second to press down on the D-pad twice. You know,
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Okay. Moving on, we have a few more categories left. I believe we have our other half of the categories. Items. Doom, what did you give the items of Metroid Zero Mission?
Give the so this one's really difficult because there's two ways I could grade this. Do I grade, you know, the new items and new functionalities that Zero Mission grants? If that was the case, I'd probably do it low. But and I say this a lot, but Zero Mission was the first Metroid game that I beat. So this was the game where I really got to play with these items for the first time and, you know, experience, what a typical Metroid item progression looked like. And from that perspective, I would give it a 5. And so I'm not sure which way I'm going to go with that. Maybe I think at the end of the day, I'll go with a 4, but I could definitely see someone going one way or the other. For a wide variety of reasons. I know Andy in particular, he's not a fan of the unknown items. And I actually can understand from his perspective why, because he did go through that traditional Metroid item progression before, and those unknown items eventually being revealed as, items that he had already collected before, I could definitely see how that would be kind of underwhelming. But again, for me, as someone who had no idea that you could get a jump that just lets you go infinitely as high as you want, or the plasma beam, which just nukes everything in your path, or a sick-looking gravity suit. I didn't know there were any other suits in the game. That was just like, whoa, that blew me away as a kid. And so I definitely, replaying that game, even though, I've played every Metroid game to this day, I still kind of ride that high when I'm replaying Zero Mission. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'll give it a 4, and pretty much for the same reasons. I didn't really know at the time what stuff was going to be. I mean, I guess I had an idea from playing Fusion and Metroid Prime, but it was a cool surprise, and I knew that those things weren't in the original game, which I think was just very fun. And again, it had a story element to it. It was, tied to Samus not having like the legendary suit she needed, and you didn't necessarily know what they were going to be, even if you did, I guess. I think just marking it on its own merits and not like what you may or may not know from previous game, especially because it's supposed to be the first in the series. I like the implementation of the unknown items. I think it's fun, like, because the alternative, I guess, would be just to let Samus just get them, And I was like, okay, fine, but I like that there was at least maybe a little bit of mystery or intrigue for it, at least for the people who didn't know. And honestly, at the time, a lot of people, especially me, like, they hadn't played the original Metroid NES game, so that this was their first introduction to the original Metroid story. So it was a surprise. And so I think on that, like, yeah, there were some people who might have known, but is it the biggest deal? I don't think so. I think it was like those items weren't in the original Metroid. It's like, oh, I've collected these in another Metroid game. Okay, but you didn't collect them in the original game that this is remade off of. So I think it's a little different, If the original Metroid had the plasma beam or something like that, and then, but okay, fine. You got me. It has the gravity suit, but it didn't. So, I think it was fine. I liked the unknown items, and yeah, I have fond memories of it as a kid as well. So maybe I'm a little biased. So I'll give it a 4 as well.
Mm-hmm. And even stuff like the power grip. Like, I know Fusion added like ledge grabbing in there, but like you couldn't shoot from the ledges, and I love how Zero Mission. It's not just, you don't just shoot from the ledges, just as a random added ability. Like, there's actual functionality on that. Like there's boss fights that take advantage of that too, which I think is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. No, 100% agree. Okay, moving on here. We are now officially, I think, at the 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, almost there. Unless I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, moving on to the next category. We are on, what are we on? Areas, I believe now. Areas. Okay, the areas of the game. So this is also kind of tied, I think, to the world a little bit. And we touched upon it a little bit. Doom, the areas of the game. What do you think?
Yeah, for the same reason I said before, probably gonna give it a 4. I'm not really sure how to differentiate these categories, if I'm being honest. Maybe
sometimes I
yeah. Yeah. But But yeah, one thing again that I'll really say is I like how I like some of the unique interpretations that Zero Mission has as opposed to the NES Metroid interpretations. Like I don't feel like it takes away from the NES one, and I don't feel like NES takes away from Zero Mission. I feel like they both offer really fun interpretations of these environments, and then Zero Mission also adds a lot of cool environments. Like I really think Chozodi is a really interesting place. Kind of tying into the lore and the story aspect again. I really like the importance of that area. And then even Crateria, they add Crateria from Super Metroid, and it's not a big area by any means, but again, just having that connective tissue to a future game, which obviously didn't exist when Metroid One was a thing. That's pretty awesome as well. And so, yeah, I don't really have much else to add that I haven't already said for World.
Yeah, no, that's we might have to sit down with Andy and maybe talk about a definitive ranking 2.0 perhaps here to fix these categories. But anyway, that's for another definitive ranking perhaps. Yeah, for the areas, I think the addition of like the new stuff again really adds a lot. It wasn't just that they were making the old areas bigger; they added completely new stuff that you couldn't traverse previously, which is very, very cool. And I think goes a long way because it like you said, it adds more to that connectivity of Super Metroid, but I think it really does add just more of the Super Metroid experience directly into Zero Mission, not only with those areas, but also with the other items that are added, some of the extra bosses that are added, right? So like all of those kind of things almost make this like in a way a little bit of like a Zero Mission, like a Metroid remake with a lot of Super Metroid thrown in. And this is certainly one of those ways that it does that. The areas are all very distinct. It's never like, oh, this is the water area, this is the lava area, but it's clearly, it's not just the lava area. And I love the addition of I think the Chozo area, the Chozo Ruins area at the very end of the game is so sick, and is one of the coolest additions you can probably have in a Metroid game, right? Going through additional space pirate facilities. Torian looks awesome as well. I mean, I would give. What did you give this? What was your number?
I gave it a 4 because that's the same I gave it a World. So I just assume you're going to give it a 5 because that's what you gave World. So
yeah, I mean, I think going back to it, it is so tied with those other categories, but it gives you that distinct feeling of being on an alien planet. The areas themselves are all self-contained and maybe bleed into each other a little bit, like as expected in a Metroid game, but they all give very different experiences, which is what you're looking for, and is a lot of fun. So I mean, knocked it out of the park. I think it's really just a absolutely awesome vision, or like, I guess, re-envisioning of the original areas and giving them some more life. So 5 for me, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Because I love Super Metroid, but obviously Super Metroid, and this is something that Andy and I have vocally disagreed on before. Super Metroid has Meridia, and I freaking hate Meridia.
It's true.
And yeah, as much as I love Super Metroid, it does have Meridia. Zero Mission, on the other hand, there's no area where it's like, oh man, we have to revisit this area. It's like, no, every single area I love visiting in
That's
Zero
true.
Mission.
There aren't any stinkers. There's no Magmore Caverns. There's no Meridia. I mean, I like Magmore Caverns, but yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Bosses and enemies. Okay. I'll kick this one off here. I'm gonna give this one a 4 because I think the bosses in Zero Mission are pretty solid for the most part, and I like that they went out of their way to add a bunch of more bosses and sub bosses to the game besides just having Kraid, Ridley, and Mother Brain. I mean, you get the giant centipede, you get the acid worm, you get the larva bosses, that trio there, or the larva boss, the bug, the trio, the Chozo test, you get the Mecha Ridley. Maybe sometimes it's a bit more quality over quantity, but I think for the most part, all those bosses are fun and they have their good bursts of excitement, or they're just overall a fun boss battle. I also thought the original bosses are brought to life very well and are awesome to fight, especially Kraid and Mother Brain and Ridley as well. I would say my only critiques are I wish Ridley was a little harder of a fight, though I love the fight itself, the arena. It's so cool. I just wish it was a little harder. And obviously Mecha Ridley, though, I think it's a funny boss and I don't mind fighting it. Maybe could have been a better boss to end the game on, or maybe could have been harder just in general. Maybe the Chozo test was maybe the better boss to end up on. I don't know, thematically. So for those reasons, I'd give it a 4, but it's again more of like a 4.5. I'm rounding down at this point. I love all the bosses that Zero Mission adds. I love that a lot of them are just straight up big things in the environment that you're fighting, and that's, I think, one of Metroid's strengths, is these big, awesome beast creatures that Samus has to take on in a sci-fi environment. So a lot of good stuff in here. Give it a 4 for sure. And then just like the general enemies of the game. I mean, you get a lot of just re-envisioned enemies. I think some carried over from Super as well, and all of that plays together very well. There's a lot, like you said, there's no like dull moment. There's always something to fight literally every step you take, which is great.
Yeah, so Andy and I, we actually ranked the Zero Mission bosses near the start of the year to kind of commemorate the 20th anniversary. Which, yeah, for those who don't remember, yeah, this game is over 20 years old now, technically. And soon Prime 2 will be joining that in November as well. So we'll definitely be doing some retrospective coverage on that one as well. But yeah. Anyways, back on topic. I'm gonna give this a 3. Again, like you said, I don't think there's an actual stinker here. There's no boss where it's like, oh no, I have to face this boss. There's no moment like that. But I do think a lot of the bosses are just a bit on the easy side for me personally. And the spectacle is all there, which is awesome. The designs are absolutely killer. There's no design that I dislike. I think Kraid, Ridley look some of the best they've ever been. Imago, like we talked about earlier, the Acid Worm, like those look awesome. The Chozo test looks so cool. I love all that, but most of the fights themselves, and I wish they were just a little bit more engaging. There is some fun to be had when you do optimize it, and there's some fun to be able to just like annihilate Kraid in like less than 3 seconds. There's a little bit fun in that, but I would much prefer having a much more engaging fight at that point. And there's still a couple of those. I really enjoy the Chozo test and kind of like those subtle callbacks to like Castlevania style boss fights. Yeah, even the music a little bit, which we'll get into later. And then the Robo Ridley fight, I like how if you go for 100%, it does like double or triple damage and it has more health. So I really like that. But and then the Mother Brain fight too, I also really like. But otherwise, it's fine. There's no bad fights, but they're all fine for me. So I'm gonna give it a 3.
It was funny because you're like, oh, this boss is good, and this one's good, and this one's good, and this one's good. But other than that, they're all fine. Like, I'm going to list off almost all the bosses there. No, I get what you're picking. I'm picking up what you're putting down. I do agree that I wish there was, and maybe this is probably for a lot of Metroids, not just Zero Mission, especially of that time, of maybe being a little harder and not as easy, but I get it. I think I was okay with some of the earlier bosses not being as harder as they could be if the later bosses were harder. Like if Ridley and the Chozo test and Mecha Ridley were all just a smidge harder. I think would have just really upped the ante, but I still love them enough to give them a 4. Okay, I miscounted earlier, but now we are at the last 2 here, and we're making pretty good time by my calculation, so that's great. We touched upon this a little bit earlier. Doom expansions. I know this is tied a bit to Shine Spark puzzles and some other crazy stuff you can do in the game, so I will include that in the ranking here. How you feeling about expansions?
Yeah. When I think of expansions, I kind of view that as like not the actual items you get themselves, but like the puzzles to get to the items. And in that case, I'm gonna give this a 5, dude. I again, Zero Mission is one of my favorite games, 100%. And it's because these puzzles are so much fun to do. And like I mentioned earlier, the Shine Spark is heavily intrinsically tied to a lot of these. And yeah, it's just an absolute blast, doing it either intentionally or unintentionally, getting expansions out of order. Like, if you do early Ridley, you can get some of those missile expansions early. And that's the thing too. There isn't like one set route you have to go down, if you're trying to do Zero Mission. Even if you're going for 100%, there's so many different routes that you can try out just to experiment, just to play the game differently. And it's awesome. There isn't really the only puzzle I really dislike is there's 2 infamous Shine Spark puzzles in Ridley's Lair that involves well, yeah, I just said they're Shine Spark puzzles, so obviously it involves the Shine Spark. But it's not the first one. A lot of people hate that first one. I actually love that one. It's so much fun to do when you actually know how to avoid like all the quicksand blocks and whatnot. The one that I don't like is the one where you have to like do a frame perfect Shine Spark jump through the Shine Spark blocks. That's the only one that I'm not a fan of, but like that's one out of like what 100 or so like puzzle expansions. So yeah, this one's gonna be an easy 5 for me.
Yeah, easy 5 for me. I think the cool or the good way to look at it is maybe if you can't find the difficulty in the bosses, the real bosses of the game are the Shine Spark puzzles, and you have a plentiful amount of bosses to deal with in that case. Yeah, I mean there are a bunch of Shine Spark puzzles. I think there's one where like you got to like run out one room, come back into the other one, and then like morph ball Shine Spark back into the other room. Like just crazy stuff like that where you're got to go back and forth and use your morph ball and test your reflexes. And I think that's where I really Metroid Fusion, I don't remember just because that was my first Unity Metroid ever really getting crazy with like the technical stuff of the game. I think it's Zero Mission. That was my first 2D Metroid where I did more Shine Spark stuff and tried to complete the game for 100%. Or, you know, I guess like until I found out that you could also do that in Fusion, but you know, I wasn't, I was just, you know, wanted to beat the game as often as I could. Yeah, for all the same reasons, I think, agreed. I mean, I guess maybe there's an argument that some of them could be very frustrating. And sometimes doing some of these puzzles can just really make you want to just pull your hair out. But they're so satisfying to when you finally get them. And I'm not sure if I can knock the game for giving me some difficulty where I was just previously knocking it for not having some. So, especially on something that's essentially optional. So, yeah, I'm going to give this one also a 5.
Mm-hmm. And even going back to what you were talking about with Fusion for a moment, like I think the difference with Fusion as well, one, Zero Mission, I think Zero Mission adds the ability to actually Shine Spark and Morph Ball. I don't think you could do that in Fusion. But even beyond that, a lot of the Shine Spark puzzles in Fusion don't happen until the 100% sweep. I think Zero Mission does a much better job of, you know, giving you more opportunities throughout the game, not just mandatory, but optional ones as well throughout the adventure. As well as the 100% sweep. Whereas Fusion, it just kind of backloads that until the very end, and you can only do it as an optional thing.
Yeah, I think you're right on the Morph Ball Shine Spark too, because I can't picture in my head doing that ever in Fusion, whereas I know I've definitely done it in Zero Mission. Okay, Doom, the final category here, and it is the one I'm sure that you have a lot to say about. So I guess I'll go first because I don't have too much to say that's going to be worthwhile. I gave it a 5. I mean, the Zero Mission OST is some classic Metroid. I think the title theme might be the best in the series, perhaps. The menu select, the sub-boss theme, the Norfair theme. I don't know if these are the right words for it, but that like crunchy, pixely snare in the back, and then you have that like warped, like sharp, plucky piano with the choral vocals in the background with those big drum hits, and so good. Kraid's Lair, classic peak Metroid right there. The Ridley area theme is funky, and the Ridley and the Mecha Ridley themes are both really good. And then also, like, I love the Space Pirate, like, infiltration theme, because that's just, like, late game, pure Metroid to me, where I'm just, like, running through rooms and obliterating stuff and dealing with that. Yeah, I was
about to say, are you referring to the theme where they're alert, or the one where you first go on and you're sneaking aboard the ship? Because I love both of those, personally.
They're similar, aren't they?
Not real. Well, so they're based off they're both based off the so the one where they're alert is based off the Super Metroid pirate theme, where the one where you're sneaking aboard is based off of a wrecked ship from Super Metroid.
Yeah, I'm talking about the one where they're alerted.
Gotcha. Okay.
I like the wrecked one version as well, but I love the alerted one too. That one is something that's burned into my brain. But yeah, easy 5 for me. I love this OST. Yeah, 5.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go quite as high. I'm going to give this a 4, but yeah, definitely another soundtrack that I love. Can't imagine giving this a 1. I have no idea who would do such a thing, but yeah, Zero Mission's so good.
I don't know. He's gonna have to explain himself, I think, when he gets back next week, because that's
and he has the audacity to say my Fendrana take is bad. I still think Fendrana's a 5 out of 5. All right. Anyways.
No, you're right.
Yeah. Zero Mission is such a wonderful score. I love one of the really interesting things about it is that you know, when you're comparing it to Fusion, that was specifically that was headed by Minako Hamano, and then Akira Fujiwara assisted her as well. But then for Zero Mission, you had Hamano and Kenji Yamamoto coming together, who previously worked together on Super Metroid, and like you could really see if you know like which pieces that they composed in Super Metroid, you can definitely see like which pieces they composed in Zero Mission just by like connecting the dots, you know, whether it's, you know, a previous theme or just like a compositional style that was used in those games. And I think it's really interesting just seeing how those are all laid out combined with those Metroid 1 influence as well. And you know, you mentioned that title theme in particular. My God, this might be one of my favorite title themes in the series, man. This title theme is so beautiful.
After listening to it, I was like, this might be the best one. It's so simple and good. So good.
Prime 1 is my favorite title theme just because I think that's the if I asked someone to compose a Metroid game, like that's the song I would give them to study. That to me, like that is the very essence of Metroid, that Prime 1 title theme. But my God, this Zero Mission theme is so beautiful, and I love the way, you know, it recontextualizes the second half into, you know, to this you know, this beautiful melodic section, but still makes it in a way to where it's able to, you know, to go back into that creepy main theme again with those very dingy minor chords. You know, you mentioned the Norfair theme as well. Again, so different from NES Norfair, but I think
Norfair, man.
I think Kenji Yamamoto makes it work so well. You know, he incorporates, you know, those now iconic choirs that are all over the Metroid series that he introduced in Super Metroid. You know, he incorporates into this theme, and it sounds so beautiful. You know, you mentioned those thundering bass drums in the background, and it's just so cool. I mentioned this when you were talking about the pirates. I love that first theme when you're sneaking aboard the ship. This is one of Hamano's pieces, and it's based off the wrecked ship from Super Metroid. But it's, you know, it kind of reminds me of a lot of Fusion's soundtrack, you know, which I think we talked about this before. But Fusion, you know, it has this very, you know, it goes for a lot of espionage and slasher themes with Fusion, and you don't really get the slasher aspect in Zero Mission, but you still get a lot of those espionage and undercover tones in the in that pirate theme. And I really love how Hamano like is able to reference Super Metroid while also just completely transforming the context of that piece into something completely different. And then like you said, oh my God, the Kraid theme.
I mean, speaks for itself.
Oh! especially the new that new section that's added where it's, you know, it's just, you know, the choir just, you know, taking on the bass of that piece and just letting that be, you know, the new solo to transition back into the main loop again. So 10 out of 10, no notes.
Yeah, I honestly, that and this Norfair theme and the title theme. I mean, when you said, and I think it's totally fair when you said like the Prime 1 intro is like quintessential Metroid. I think this is quintessential Metroid. I almost wish there was more of this in the Prime games, like this kind of vibe of music. And I don't know, this is like, when I think of Metroid, like this is pure Metroid right here at its best. Those three themes that were mentioned here, like the title theme, the Norfair theme, the Kraid's Lair, I mean, that's just absolute peak. Yeah, sorry, but I can't.
No. Feel free, go off, King.
I can't gush enough about listening to this game again.
There's another underrated piece that a lot of people don't talk about, and it's the theme when you hit the Chozo ruins, not Chozodia, but the Chozo ruins that are located in Crateria. That first theme that you hear when you go, it's an original piece of music. It's not, you know, it's not a cover arrangement of something that was in a previous game. It's a brand new piece of music, and this is one of my favorite pieces in the game. I absolutely love that Chozo Ruins theme. It's, you know, it's so somber, it's so reflective, and like it's, you know, I love when Metroid music, I think Metroid music is at its best when it's a part of the environment and it's telling a story. It's, you know, it's one of the characters there, and I think there's no better track in the game that does that as that Chozo Ruins theme.
I 100% agree. I mean, there are a lot of good themes in this game that are just very low, somber, like humming almost. You're just listening to like the mechanical hum of like the world around you a little bit. It's like foreboding, and which is great because this game just has this overall sense of this foreboding sense across the game, which it plays. It's great that you can dip in and out of that as you go across the world.
I also really like, I also, it's more of a brief one here, but like I really like after you pass the Chozo test and it gives you the the bombastic item collect theme. It's very different than the kind of low key one you've gotten throughout the game, and it's very. I feel like it's really triumphant, and it fits the moment of you just becoming an absolute god and just being able to smash everything in your path. And that moment just gets me every time.
No, I 100% agree. I'm also thinking about this, by the way, that we were thinking about maybe revising the categories, because I thought about this. We talk about the music, but we're not really talking about like the sound effects or the sound design. I don't have a good thought on that, but do you have any thoughts on like, and this doesn't have to factor into your rating or whatever, but I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on the game's like sound design, like audio direction, not just like the music that's composed?
I really like the sound direction, especially for a GBA game. Like, I think it really takes advantage of like, kind of this, these very low powered audio hardware, to put it very mildly, on the Game Boy Advance. And I think Fusion does a great job as well. I especially I love how crunchy the missiles in this game are. Particular, I love Super Metroid, and I love the Super Metroid audio design too. But one thing I don't like is the missiles. They sound very soft. They feel like you're smacking someone with a pillow when you hit someone. But like in Fusion and Zero Mission, you hit a missile with someone, and that thing, you can feel like metal cracking. You can feel there's a crackle, there's a crunch, there's an explosion. Like it feels like something you do not want to come in contact with. Like it feels like a weapon.
It does. You're right. You know what I also love about this game is, if I remember correctly, and I'm pretty sure I do, it reuses the Ridley scream from Fusion. And I will say, I do remember popping for that. Back when I first played this game, I was like, well, I guess not popping for it. It was just like, what else is he going to sound like, like that's what Ridley sounds like, I have fond memories of also hearing the same exact unchanged Ridley sound effect in Zero Mission 2 years later, or 3 years later, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't play Fusion until afterwards, so it was kind of the reverse for me. Was playing Fusion, it's like, oh no, so this isn't the first time he's done that. Okay,
that's
yeah,
actually cool as well. I love that. Okay, so Doom, that was all of our categories. That was our definitive ranking. So Zero Mission, it looks like for me, it looks like I'm pretty much a 5 on this, and it looks like it's a 4 for you. Do you think that's fair?
I think if I were to rank Zero Mission as a whole, I think I would definitely give it closer to a 5 personally.
Okay.
Maybe just because like, yeah, if you look at the raw number, kind of going back to the story again. Yeah, going back to the story again, like, again, I think you and I look at story differently, for example, like, whereas I'm looking at like the raw, I'm looking at like what the raw actual story is. I don't really consider, like, to go back to the Imago thing again, I don't really factor Imago into the story of Zero Mission, but I still think that's a really cool part of the game. And so I'm able to separate that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so some of the categories that like I would rank lower don't really find important to Zero Mission. I think the only lower category that I would rank is maybe the bosses. But I mean, otherwise, like, everything is just firing on all cylinders for me when it comes to this game.
Well, I'm okay with us both giving it a 5. If you feel a 4 is more comfortable, that's fine. I'm okay with that. If you feel like it's a strong 5, that's cool, because it's a strong 5 for me. GOAT game. Yeah, this was great. I can't wait to play more. If you haven't played Zero Mission, I highly recommend it, because it's now available on the Nintendo Switch Online. And I mean, for me, this is a definitive Metroid game. Like, this is a top Metroid game for me. Clearly top Metroid game for us. Love this game. And I would love, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if maybe there is a game that, like, I think of in terms of like a remake, not a remaster, not an HD re-release, but like a true remake that really hits as well as Zero Mission does for its respective series. I don't know. I can't think of another one.
I mean, other than AM2R, but I mean, if we're talking like official entries, like, man, Zero Mission, there just really isn't anything like it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So if you haven't played it, go and play it. Before we wrap, though, I'm gonna go into this Oh, well, I guess I shouldn't do that because it's pulling away. I'll cut that out of the YouTube video. I was trying to go over and pull over Andy's scores. But if, by doing that, that pulls the camera away on the YouTube video for Discord. So unfortunately, I can't do that. Doom, can you?
I can. Yeah, let me
Can you
do that. That's yeah. So I'm looking at Andy's scores right now.
Real quick.
They
So
are.
Andy couldn't be here. He's sick today, so we hope Andy feels better. However, Andy did provide us with his definitive ranking scores for Zero Mission and said that we were free to share them. And originally I was like, I'm not sharing this. But now I feel compelled. And if you don't mind doing the honors, Doom, feel free to share.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think most of these are fine, but there's one, and we've already kind of alluded to which one it is, that we definitely disagree on, to put it very mildly. But yeah, we'll just go down here. So for World, Andy gave it a 4, which is the same score that I gave, so obviously that's a correct take.
Yep.
Art style, he gave it a 5.
Yep.
Story is a 3, which I think is fine.
Yep.
Pacing is a 5. Gameplay is a 5.
Yep.
Items are a 2. Now again, we had very different scores for the items.
Unknown items. He's an unknown item hater.
Exactly. And to be fair, from the position he's in, I can understand why that didn't work as much for him. So even though I don't necessarily agree for that, I get where he's coming from. So I can excuse that.
I won't.
Areas are a 4. Oh, don't worry. The hammer's coming down soon. Don't you worry.
Next week.
Yeah. Areas gave it a 4. Bosses and enemies. This one surprised me. He also gave a 4. I was expecting this one to be a lot lower, honestly.
Wow, me and Andy agreed. Okay.
Yeah. And then expansions, 5. No surprise there. Music. This guy gave the music a 1. For context, folks, he gave Metroid Dread's music a 3.
Yeah.
That's not legal.
So we're not doing a Q&A next week, but everyone listening, you are feel free to submit your questions to Andy, including what's wrong with you and how can you do this? Feel free to submit those kinds of questions. Yeah, like I was saying before the show, a 1 is egregious, I think, for Metroid Zero Mission's OST. Disrespectful, I would even say. So,
honestly, and this is slightly off topic, it's not even the only recent bad music take Andy has had recently. He also doesn't like Not Like Us by Kendrick, so that's also an absolute horrible take in my opinion as well. But
he's from Canada, so he's on a side.
He's not. Well, he's specifically he's not on Team Drake. He's made that very clear. But yeah.
We'll see about
that. Doesn't change the fact that it's an egregious take, but I don't want to throw him that hard under the bus.
Let's let him come back and defend himself next week before we go farther with that. But those takes, at least on Zero Mission, I have no problem airing out to the public before he can get here and give himself any reasoning. Though, to be honest, if he was here, he would double down on what he's saying.
Oh, yeah.
Worse. So I respect that, and also we'll see what he says next week. Okay. That said, Doom, a great definitive ranking, our first we've done in a little while. Any closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm like, if you for some reason you have not played Metroid Zero Mission yet, my mans or womans, what are you doing? It is on NSO right now. Play this game. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Play this phenomenal game right now. It's available like pretty much everywhere you want it now. It's, the pacing alone, like we were talking about, just how quick and easy it is to get through. It's an absolute blast. This game is 20 years old and it doesn't feel like it in the slightest.
Yeah, I'm very much someone who is never going to be like, go and buy this Metroid game because it's Metroid. You'll never see me going on Twitter just be like, buy this game, get Metroid, go and get it just because it's Metroid. If you're gonna check, the reason why I like many Metroid games, recommending it because it's good, because it's fun. Even 20 years later, it feels good. It's a great game to replay, to play for the first time. For me, it's a game that I got literally when I was 11 years old, and for me, a golden age of Nintendo back then, a golden age for Metroid, of course. And it's still to this day one of my favorite games of all time, which obviously you could see I'm pretty biased and had no problem giving this game as many 5s as I could because it deserves it. But I'm very much of the side of things that I'm not just going to recommend something because it's something that I enjoyed just for the sake of the franchise getting more sales, right? Like, this is a game that you should play because It's a definitive Metroid experience. It's a definitive Game Boy Advance experience and Nintendo experience, actually. It's one of the best games they've ever made, one of the best remakes ever made, and is a absolute treat. And if you have played it, go back and try it out. And again, it is on Nintendo Switch now, so easy way to finally play it there.
And yeah, feel free to check out our Metroid Zero Mission guide on OmegaMetroid.com while you're at it. We have a general walkthrough, if you just want to walk through the game's standard way and just, appreciate it in a different light. We also have a ton of speedrunning shortcuts and, Shine Spark tips as well. So, if you really want to fully optimize that game or you want to try going for that dastardly 15% run, you can follow our guides and help yourselves to do that as well.
Absolutely. All right. Check that out. Absolutely do so. I actually don't know what our next episode is going to be or what we're talking about in the coming weeks. So, and I am afraid to go check.
I think our next episode is either the Silex history episode or or something else related to Prime. I know we're going back to Prime 4 next week. So
okay, well, some more Prime 4, unless something else comes up, in which case, we'll never see where where life takes us. But with all that said, make sure you check us out on OmegaMetroid.com. We are at Omega Metroid Pod on Twitter. We are the Omega Metroid Podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms. We are on Patreon, where you can check us out for exclusive bonuses like the Great Area Ranking Show and also access to other cool things, as well as I don't think it's behind the Patreon. We also have an Etsy page where you can buy some cool Omega Metroid merch. You can follow us on Twitter at Daxity_, at Doomitalcross, at Spiteri316. You can also follow us on and subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can watch these episodes not only through audio, but also on video. You can see us chilling here, hanging out, and whatnot. We post clips on there. I don't know if I know you're not as big of a wrestling guy here, Doom, but I'm a big wrestling podcast fan. I listen to and watch the Deadlock podcast, and so shout outs to them because they're very funny. But there are these YouTube videos online where they'll do the podcast, which is shot how we do it, but people will sync up clips of what they're talking about over that, and I want to start doing that at some point. I know it's a lot more work, but it'd be great if we did an episode what we're talking about was the gameplay was overlaid on the YouTube video. I don't know, that'd be cool. Anyway, check us out on YouTube maybe one day. I think I plugged everything else. We have a Discord. Come check us out on the Discord, where we are talking about Metroid literally every day. We have active channels for a bunch of different stuff, different Metroid games. We're talking about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. We are talking about upcoming Metroid games, upcoming Nintendo stuff. We have, news, art, movies, all that kind of stuff. We're hanging out. We're chilling. And of course, we also talk about the latest episodes as well. I think that's everything. I hope I hit all of the talking points there. Andy can check me next time, but I'm usually pretty good at that. If there is anything else there, then without further ado, Doom, thanks for joining me for a definitive ranking. That was awesome. Thank you all for tuning in to listen to some Zero Mission, and we will see you next mission here on the Omega Metroid Podcast.